Hi guys, welcome to Apocryph Gaming. Now you should hopefully notice that I've improved my lighting. I got myself a ring light and hopefully this means better, clearer and certainly brighter videos. One can only hope. So, Prologue. My group is starting a new campaign in Alent. I've done a little bit on Alent in the introduction video, you can watch that if you haven't already, but it's basically a homebrew island in an established world setting, specifically between the continents of Mazdaka and Faerun. Much to the mild surprise of my group, I opened with, we begin in Waterdeep, the largest port city of Faerun. And the reason I started it like that is because, barring Valkis, nobody in the group has ever been to Alent, much less have come from it. So it didn't really make sense to take the group and just put them in Alent and that's going to be our starting place. I also wanted to give the sense of, it's not the destination, it's the journey. I wanted to give the players a couple of encounters that would help them feel comfortable in their character skins, as well as get an idea of what they are going to be like as characters. Are they going to be mercenarial? Are they going to be heroes and save the day? Or, God forbid, are they just looking for something to kill? So they begin by boarding a ship. It's called the Lorelei, and it's ostensibly a merchant vessel that travels from Waterdeep to Alent and then on to the Golden City in Mazdaka. They also take passengers on board because, you know, they've got to make some extra money somehow. I've told the players that they board for a pittance. The reason being is that it's considered a good omen amongst sailors to have adventures on board. And these are fairly seasoned adventurers, being third level and all. So, they get to go on for next to nothing. I described the layout of the ship to them. I explained that voyage is going to take about a day, and as they explore the ship, Tall Crow, the Kenku cleric in our party, he looks up and he notices a figure up in the crow's nest, and he's doing all these sort of hand gestures and strange arm movements. And an insight check later, and he realises that he's directing wind into the sails. He's able to control the wind in some way. Then, about an hour into the voyage, this gnome bursts through the cabin doors. He's being chased by three big burly blokes, one of whom is a half-orc. He's got this really nasty-looking battle axe, which he's brandishing and chasing the gnome with. The gnome himself has got blue flowy robes, he's got this big old spell book of some kind, and he is running for his life. I put this encounter in because I wanted to see what the players, and by extension what the characters, would do in a situation that didn't necessarily involve them. Would they try and intervene? Would they try and save the wizard, even though they don't even know who he is? Or would they just stand around and see how things played out? So the gnome is cornered by these three thugs, and Shadris, the druid, intervenes. He goes up to the biggest of the three, the half-orc with the nasty-looking axe, and asks what this is about. And the half-orc turns round and he thrusts the axe towards the druid, and pressing it against his chest, and says, "You stay out of this, boy, if you know what's good for you." Shadris just puts his hands up and says, easy there, I'm just saying, isn't this a bit much? Whatever the gnome did, I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement, don't you think? How much to let the gnome go? Now this really threw me. I didn't really expect anybody in the party to be willing to part with gold to save somebody that they didn't even know. So I rolled a d100 to see how much gold that the half-orc wanted. And he turns around and he says, 49 gold. A weirdly specific 49 gold, and we'll leave him alone. And the druid pays. So the half-orc leaves, and the gnome is busy composing himself and getting himself all dusted off and what have you. He's a gnome wizard. He goes by the name of Tarin, and he's very unlike a wizard. He's very sort of hapless and skittish, and very unlike a wizard in that respect. And he turns to the druid once he's got himself. He says, "Oh, thank you. How can I ever repay you?" And the druid kind of reminds him that, "Oh, well, I am down 49 gold. So Tarin says, "Oh, of course. And he starts rummaging around and he gets some coins together and presents a coin purse to the druid, 49 gold. "Oh, and one more thing for you. And he starts rummaging around in this really small bag, and he's pulling things out of it that really should have no business fitting in this bag in the first place. And then he pulls out a scroll. Now, I'm a bit of a fan of loot tables. I knew I wanted to give the party a spell scroll. I didn't know what sort of spell level I wanted to give them. So I took a d10 and I rolled. And that's a bit of a roll. And I thought I'd generate the kind of spell level based on that. So a roll of a 1 would give a cantrip, a roll of a 10 would give a 9th level spell. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the result of the roll was, and I think out of character the players figured it out eventually. In character they're still none the wiser, but maybe you can figure it out at home. So Taryn presents this scroll to the druid and says, "Here is my most treasured possession. I'm not quite ready for this yet, but I want you to have it." And Shadris takes the scroll and looks at it and tries to identify it, and he can't. It's not really in his wheelhouse, as it were, being a druid. So he asks Taryn, what is this spell? What does this scroll do? And I had Taryn turn round to him and say, "It's a weird spell. I don't know the specifics. It's part of the reason that I'm not ready for this spell. But I want you to have it." A voice then comes from above them, and they look up, and it's the figure from the crow's nest, the one who was directing the wind into the sails, and he floats down to the deck. And he introduces himself. "I am Tobias Cordson, sorcerer extraordinaire and son of God." It's a bit of a strange entrance, but... And he goes to have a look at the scroll. Now, he can't identify it either, but he feels enough of the magic from it that he does not like it one bit. He literally recoils, takes a step back. He says, "Oh, this is a dark magic at play. I'll have no part of this." And he gives the scroll back to the druid. And finally, Vera, our party's resident wizard herself, also a gnome wizard as well, she decides to have a look at this scroll, and she gets the closest to anybody to identifying it. She's still not quite there yet, but she's able to tell out this is a high-level illusion magic, and the sorcerer had a right to be a bit terrified of it. It is literally the stuff of nightmares. So, time passes, and Tall Crow, the Kenku cleric, he decides to pass the time by casting things like guidance on the sailors. He earns favour with them by making their workload easier with that spell, whenever they're swabbing the decks or working the sails, things like that. And they cotton on to this, and they really appreciate it. So the following morning, they all get together and they present him with a small coin purse to show him their appreciation for his efforts. And then they arrive. First they see a tall spire from the horizon. Valkis recognises this as Alent's Tower of the Gods. They then see 3 small golden orbs, which then manifest into much more detailed shapes. And again, Valkis recognises this as the 3 guardians of Alent. There's a narwhal, a dire lion, and a dragon, the guardians of the sea, the land, and the air, respectively. Now, Alent's founding king was a big fan of first impressions, so he spared no expense in the development of the harbour for Alent. So when they arrive, they find that all of the piers and the floor itself is all fine marble white, all with gold inlay, and it's immaculately clean as well. So the ship makes port and the party disembarks, and it's at that point they're really considering their options. The sorcerer Tobias also disembarks, and he recognises the party, and he decides to go and speak to them. He goes up to them and he asks, "Have you been here before?" And the party look at each other and say, No, we haven't. We're not really sure what to do next at this point. And Tobias says, "Well, I am going to the Tower of the Gods to speak to my father." He then sees something on Tall Crow, the Kenku cleric. He sees a holy symbol of Akadi, and he kind of scoffs at it and belittles Akadi's domain of goddess of the air. And he says that his father's power is much greater in this domain. So the Kenku thinks, again, with this whole father thing, I want to know what's going on there. So he makes an insight roll. And I tell the Kenku player this. You are sure that he thinks he is the son of God. But as far as you're concerned, he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy.
Now you listen here. He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy.
The funny thing is, I think the player of Kenku was about the only person who got that reference. But Tall Crow turns to Vera and he just says, little things entertain little minds. So the party decide to go to the Tower of the Gods. They might as well, it's a good starting point. And so they arrive there at a hugely colossal building. It's got an appropriately grand entrance as well. A huge doorway, the doors open as they arrive. And they enter into a small room that's got these shrines all dotted about. And there in the middle of the room is this rather majestic looking desk. It's a reception desk. It's made of marble, of mahogany and of gold. And sort of perched there on a chair in the middle behind the desk, it's just the oldest dwarf anyone has ever seen. He's a sort of mass of wrinkles as much as anything else, and no hair left on his head, but a few wispy white bits of where his beard used to be, and a brow so wrinkled that it's very, very difficult to tell if his eyes are closed and he's fallen asleep, or if that's just how they look nowadays. His robes are all a church white as well. He's quite clearly a cleric of some kind. So anyway, he's sat at the desk and he's writing into this grand old tome. And he's just minding his own business, and the party comes along and decide they're just going to ask him questions. Specifically, they want to ask about the magic here, the weave here. They heard that it's very unique and they don't know how, so they want to know how. And as the DM, I didn't really want to give them that information right away, so I had the dwarf stay stum. He refused to answer the questions about it, and he gave the excuse of, I'll only answer these questions to a higher authority than myself. The party's having none of this. They want to know the answers themselves and things like that, and they keep badgering him about it. And by this point, the dwarf has had enough, and he clicks his fingers, and 2 guards show up to usher the players out of the characters out of the tower. And as they're doing so, one of the guards says to the players, look, he's always like this. I'm really sorry. Just stop badgering him and leave him alone, and he won't grumble like this. So anyway, the party decides that they're going to look for some accommodation, and they do find a tavern a little ways from the harbour side. And they decide to settle down for the evening, and they decide to investigate as well, find out a little bit more about this city that they've arrived in. They don't know much about it yet. And through questioning the punters at the tavern, things like that, they realise that the Tower of the Gods is indeed an important landmark. It's one of the biggest tourist attractions, certainly, in Alent. But it's not the be-all and end-all of Alent. There's a lot more to this city besides. They also realise that they're starting to attract attention, particularly Tall Crow, the Kenku, particularly with regards to the novelty of a Kenku who is bartering with punters and drinking alcohol and just engaging in banter in general. That's kind of a new thing that people aren't really used to. Valkis, the Dragonborn Knight, he's aware that he's attracting attention as well, but it's the kind of attention he's always been used to. Dragonborn are always receiving attention anyway, and with him being so uniquely coloured as a platinum Dragonborn, yeah, he's had this a lot. So, night turns to day, and the party decides they're going to go and explore the city. They go to the harbour side, and they realise just how busy this city can get. There's huge crowds about, all jostling about, going about their business. It doesn't take the party long to realise, as they're exploring the area, that they are being followed. Tall Crow is the first to spot this cloaked figure, and he decides to cast Pass Without Trace on the party. The idea is that they would vanish and hide, and in the confusion, they would then turn tables on their follower and follow him. I thought it was a great plan. I thought I'd love to see how this goes. So he casts a spell and everybody vanishes, even the Dragonborn Knight with his half-plate armour and all the rest of it. And the follower panics. He can't see his target, and he's sort of darting one way and another and looking around, and then he bolts in the direction that he came from. The party, particularly Tall Crow, decides we're going to give chase. This is now a pursuit situation. So they chase him through Harbourside, and they go through these hawker stalls where all this street food is being served. And at that point, the follower just stops dead in his tracks, and he grabs either side of his head and he screams. He starts to sink to his knees. Now, Tall Crow is the first on the scene, and the player of him, I think, outside of the game, knew what was going on. So Tall Crow went and immediately cast Cure Wounds to try and stabilise this guy. And it stops him from being killed outright, but the guy still falls unconscious, so Tall Crow casts Spare the Dying. It's at that point that he notices another cloaked figure stood in a narrow alleyway watching this, and the cloaked figure just then turns and walks away. Tall Crow decides, hey, I'm going to try and cast Hold Person on this figure, and fails. He doesn't quite pursue this guy though, he thinks better of it. A crowd has gathered at this point, and Tall Crow decides to use his mimicry to sound like guards. Make way, coming through, nothing to see here, break it up, off you go, that sort of thing. And then before long, it's almost like somebody takes the words right out of his beak, and he starts to hear those same words again. Make way, coming through, nothing to see here, off you go. The Royal Knights of Alent have arrived at this point, and they are dispersing people. They're quickly setting up a cordon. And then there's one who arrives who is quite clearly the captain of the guards. He's got really quite fine white full plate armour. He's got this centurion style red cape on the back, and he's got the royal crest of Alent all over his heraldry. And he goes up to Tall Crow, the Kenku. He said, "Greetings, my name is Paladin Grail, captain of the Royal Guard. I have a few questions for you." And that is where the session left off. I thought that was a really good way to end that session, is to have the Paladin arrive. He's clearly a guy of some importance, introduce himself, and ask a couple of questions. It gives the players a chance to spend the next week thinking about how they're going to respond, what they're going to do, and really get set up ready for the next session. Now, I want to finish this video by saying that at the time of recording this, my channel has 21 subscribers. And I know that to some people is a little bit whoop-de-doo, but it really means a lot. I genuinely didn't know there are as many people as that who follow my channel, and I just want to say thank you. It means a lot, and long may it continue. Apologies for the longer video as well. I'm trying to keep things short as possible, and I'm cutting out quite a lot of detail. If you would prefer a longer video and with more details thrown in and more embellishment, then of course do let me know in the comments below, and I'll take that on board and do longer videos. If you'd rather them kept short, again, just let me know. Other than that, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.